I've had situations where I'm speaking with someone who has a communication device. I know they can't speak back to me. I'll ask them a question, and their support staff says, she can't talk. And I'm like, yes, she can. Let's give her a minute. And so it's just really a matter of educating the public that just because I can't speak doesn't mean I don't have anything to say. That is critical. That's the impetus of everything.
Hi, I'm Jeff Holden. Welcome to the Nonprofit Podcast Network. Our purpose and passion is to highlight a nonprofit organization in each weekly episode, giving that organization an opportunity to tell their story in their words to better inform and educate the respective communities they serve, as well as provide one more tool for them to share their message to constituents and donors. Our goal is to help build stronger communities through shared voices and to both encourage and support the growth of local nonprofit organizations through podcasting. Thanks to our partners for their support in getting these stories told. SMUD, Sacramento Metropolitan Utility District's Shine Awards program benefiting nonprofits for energy efficiency. CapTrust, fiduciary advice for endowments and foundations, and Western Health Advantage, a full-service healthcare plan for individuals, employer groups, and families. Not being able to speak doesn't mean you don't have something to say. An estimated 10% of the U.S. population has a speech, language, or voice disability, and many of these people could benefit from some form of communication technology. Their disability could come from a variety of sources, including cerebral palsy, ALS, autism, stroke, aphasia, and more. This episode, we explore the amazing work of the Communication Technology Education Center, CTEC, in collaboration with the Supported Life Institute. My guest, Stephanie Maki, program manager for the organization, shares how CTEC's personalized approach empowers those who struggle with verbal communication, from college students to individuals with profound intellectual challenges. Through innovative solutions and a strategic partnership with collaboration, CTEC is not only breaking down barriers, but also fostering community connections and inspiring change. Discover heartwarming success stories and learn how communication devices are opening doors to expression, independence, and social integration for those challenged with an inability to communicate traditionally. What current technology is providing is incredible as it can bring some of the brightest minds into the conversation. I think you'll be inspired by the life-changing impact of communication technology and what CTEC is accomplishing for our region. Stephanie Maki, welcome to the Nonprofit Podcast Network.
Thank you for having me here. I'm excited.
What a story we are going to share today, because it's something that many of us are aware of, but don't necessarily understand how some of these things get handled. And I'll tee it up like that because people are going to wonder, what is he talking about? First and foremost, we have a bit of a naming nomenclature we should clarify. The organization is actually Supported Life Institute.
Yes.
However, the program is CTEC.
Yes.
Explain that for us, would you?
CTEC stands for Communication Technology Education Center. Obviously a big, long name, so we go by CTEC, CTEC. We are a program of Supported Life Institute. Supported Life has been around. They were incorporated as a nonprofit back in 1991. Primarily, their initial program was to provide statewide conferences for individuals with developmental disabilities and for those who support them, families, staff, educators. And they're still doing those in their part of the program. But about 10 years into those conferences, they started noticing that there were a number of individuals that weren't able to participate fully because they couldn't speak. Decided to explore how they might be able to provide a service to that population. As it happens, at the time, one of the board members, her name's Bonnie Minton, her daughter was one of those who couldn't speak. So she and a speech language pathologist named Kristen Carroll spent the next 8 years working to develop the CTEC program. There's a lot of research and funding hurdles that they went through. But then in January of 2009, we saw our first clients. So we became a program under Supported Life Institute.
Boy, do we ever appreciate their persistence and perseverance. 8 years to get this thing started?
Yes.
Wow.
And as it happens, Kristen Carroll is still our lead speech pathologist all these years later. She's still with us working
How wonderful
to lead
is
the
that?
charge.
What a great deal of intellectual equity she's got in terms of start to where we are today.
Yes.
And it's quite significant, as we're going to find out. Let's talk about specifically what CTEC is and what a life-changing situation it can be for those who are utilizing the service as well as the families that are involved with it.
Yes. So we have speech language pathologists on staff who will meet with our clients and the clients have disabilities when it comes to that involve their speech. They may be not completely nonverbal, or they might speak, but it's difficult to understand, or they might have some sort of selective mutism. On demand, they are not able to communicate verbally. So our speech pathologists do an evaluation to see what kind of technology or some other communication solution can we provide to them so that they can make selections that serve as their voice.
So more often than not, the disability is the inability to speak. Are there other disabilities compounding that situation?
Well, the disabilities are things like cerebral palsy or autism, Down syndrome. So lack or the inability to speak is usually symptomatic of whatever condition or disability the individual has. And it could also include traumatic brain injury. At some point in their youth, they have an injury that then limits their ability.
So that's quite a spectrum. You could have somebody who is disabled to the point of not necessarily functioning completely intellectually, as well as somebody who is fully functioning intellectually but just has an inability to speak.
Absolutely. We have clients they go to college and they communicate and even do a lot of their homework sometimes with their communication device, especially if it's a computer-based Windows type thing. But we also have those that have severe intellectual disability and very basic, don't speak at all, and those that speak fairly well and even are able to spell and things like that, but they need some help in helping others to understand how they're trying to communicate. So yeah, there's a broad spectrum on so many levels.
And you mentioned that we don't necessarily have the constituent client come to a place. You said so you go to the homes to do these assessments?
Yes. The way that we approach our evaluations, we don't do any standardized testing or anything like that. We observe, we engage with, we get to know what the individual and their environments. How are they communicating at home with their family, or if they're in a care home situation, how are they communicating with their staff? If they go to a day program, how are they interacting and communicating there? Sometimes they've got a job or a volunteer responsibility, and so we try to schedule at least an appointment there to see how are they interacting and communicating there. It really helps us to determine what they need. Is there a size issue? Do they need something small and compact, or we need to be able to mount something on a wheelchair? There's just such a variety of things there that when we keep everything in the clinic, we can't get that kind of information. But additionally, with these disabilities and limited ability to speak, we see a lot of behaviors, and sometimes a clinical setting really triggers those negative behaviors. We want them to be comfortable.
And it makes sense in the home environment to see how they function.
Yes.
And really understand. Again, they're going to be much more comfortable, and I can perfectly understand how you pack somebody up, you stick them in a car or a van, they end up in an unfamiliar space. It could even be traumatic to the point of, I'm going to another medical thing, and they're going to poke and prod and, do a lot of things I don't want to experience. So
sometimes it's as simple as, I don't want to put shoes on. And so to leave the house, I have to put shoes on. And so we're going to start a whole behavior cycle just by forcing that issue. So like I said, we can remove as many barriers as possible, then we find it much more productive.
Boy, I'll bet some of the speech pathologists who are going in to do the evaluations have some stories to tell.
Oh, yes, definitely.
The people who you serve, there is a requirement in terms of the ability for them to be covered through one of the programs. Would you walk us through what that is?
Our program is not set up to be able to bill to any kind of insurance. So we rely on referrals from the Alta California Regional Center. And with that, those are clients that have been diagnosed with a disability of any kind during their developmental years, from birth to age 18, or they've acquired some kind of disability, like a traumatic brain injury or something. They've acquired some disability during those developmental years. They're able to be served by the regional center throughout the span of their life. Those are the clients that we work with. Because we don't bill to insurance, we have found that we really are not able to serve those individuals that have adult onset communication, who've had a stroke or have ALS or situations like that. Unfortunately, that's just a portion of the community that we are not able to serve at this time.
Mm-hmm. What can they expect from CTEC if you've got somebody who is disabled to the point of non-communicative? They are able to get into the program. You go and you do the assessment. Then what happens?
Well, it's not as simple as just going and doing the assessment.
I didn't think so.
Because we do work to get to know their environments, there's a number of appointments. And our evaluations actually take several months. We usually kind of a baseline is about 6 months. Sometimes we can identify something more quickly, especially if someone's had previous experience with a communication system. Sometimes it takes longer if we can't get all the scheduling to work. But what they can expect is we will provide a comprehensive evaluation, communicating with the key members of their team throughout the process. And then once we've made a recommendation, we will help them to get it funded or help them to acquire it somehow. Usually we help them with getting insurance funding. We'll send off all of the applications to the device manufacturer, and they handle all the insurance stuff. We don't do that directly. Or if we're able to get something through a grant program or somehow maybe even a free device or something that might be they can purchase on Amazon, we help get them connected to that equipment. And once they've got it, we also provide training. It's a long process. They're with us for sometimes 2 or more years throughout the process. But that training then takes, again, another several months because we are working to get those people that work with the individual, the family and staff. We want them to be able to continue supporting that communication after we exit the situation.
So it's much more comprehensive than I would have imagined in terms of start to finish. And I would imagine part of that is the proper identification of what tool is going to work best for this individual. And to be clear, you do identify and incorporate that technology piece for the person who is disabled with speech. I mean, we've all seen Stephen Hawking and how that all worked. So we have a pretty good understanding of devices to help the individual communicate. Mm-hmm. That's pretty much what we're talking about, right?
Exactly. That is what's called a speech generating device that Stephen Hawking used. His was a pretty complex system. We work with those and some that are even more complex than that, but also something as simple as an iPad or even just a button that you can record a message on that somebody can push the button. There's so many levels of technology, from no tech, a laminated sheet with pictures that they can select. Any way that they can communicate their wants and needs is part of that communication solution
process. Wow. It's amazing what's out there. Just an aside here, what have you seen? Because you've been with an organization for a while. What have you seen in the course of just the last few years in technological change for some of these devices?
One of the ones that surprised me the most, it was a couple of years ago, but there is one of our manufacturers, Control Bionics is the name of the company, and they have what is called neuronode technology, and it's pads that stick to an individual. I don't know if it's I think their temple. I'm not exactly sure. That it can be calibrated with the device so that their intention, their selections on the screen are captured without any physical movement.
So it's what they're thinking. There's some impulse of sorts that registers.
And we don't see that one a lot. What we see most often is what's called eye gaze, cameras on these communication devices that are calibrated to the user's eyes, and there's a dwell time, how long they're going to look at an icon on a screen, and then it will select it. It's a lot of really, really neat technology, and AI is starting to work its way into communication technology. We haven't worked with it a lot. I know our SLPs have been researching it, keeping their finger on the pulse of it, but we haven't started using it.
And let me just guess, SLP, speech language pathologist?
Yes, correct. Yes.
Somewhat intuitive on that one. How are the individuals' families treated in terms, so you've got the disability with the individual that you're working with. What about the caregivers around them?
There is a large education process there, because a lot of times a family will come to us and say, we want a CTEC device for our loved one. Well, CTEC, we don't have devices.
Yes.
We provide evaluations, and it's not just a one-time assessment. We have to educate them about the process and why. And sometimes it can be frustrating, and sometimes people will think that we're just speech therapy. And, with a typical speech therapy situation, somebody just comes in and works with that individual. Everybody else can go in the other room. That's not the case here. We need the families and the staff to be fully involved, because they're going to be supporting this person's communication. We're not going to be there all the time. And so they need to know how to encourage it and how to maintain it, because obviously the individual is usually not going to be able to add pictures or customize pages or anything like that on this system. That's where it's really a team effort, and it really is like learning a brand new language. Trying to teach somebody Spanish, you're not going to say, here's all the Spanish words, talk to me.
Right.
You need practice, you need support.
Yeah, and the better the team around you, the better your ability to grasp whatever it is you're being taught.
Exactly. And that's a challenge we see every day, and we really try to work with the families and the staff, everybody that's going to be a part of this individual's life, help them to be as successful as possible.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk a little bit about collaboration. Who are some of the other organizations that you find yourself working with?
Well, largely, obviously, since we do go out to these adult day programs, we work with UCP. REACH is another one, with Southside. I can't remember the rest of their title. Southside Inc., I think. EGACT is Elk Grove Adult Community Training. We go out to these day programs, so they're familiar with us. Mm-hmm. And then we also contract with school districts locally to go in and do assessments for school-aged kids.
In the classroom?
In the classroom, yes. Ideally, yes. A lot of times we will try to coordinate with when they're receiving their speech therapy services already in school, and we'll try and get our people out there at the same time so we can collaborate with that speech pathologist. But we also want to see how they're functioning in the classroom. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, we are definitely in the classroom with that. We also work with Sac State. We provide some workshops for their students that are in their special education and speech language pathology master's programs, so that they get some hands-on experience with our communication devices.
Boy, it's amazing the depth of resource you've got in the community, and so many people are just unfamiliar, even people with children with disabilities or somebody with a disabled, even adult at home. So I hope as we continue this conversation, it gives you the ability to share more, because, well, that's partly a good and a bad too, because
then that's more people.
There's more people, right?
Coming to that wait list that we're talked about. Couple of other sources that we work with, the Yochadihi Winton Nation.
Yes.
They kind of run the Cache Creek casinos out there. They have been a longtime supporter of our lending library. They help us to make sure we've got the technology and equipment we need to be able to provide devices for trials. So they've supported us over the years many times. Also, the Disability Communication Fund, now called Ability Central. A few years back, they funded a grant for us to develop our STAR video training series on our website, which is just a number of videos to help anybody to better understand how to support someone having communication challenges, whether they have a technology in a device or just something even if they don't have anything, it provides them strategies.
And I think that's really important because you don't service post 18, so adult onset, whatever it may be. Stroke is probably one of the most common, where that speech is challenged in some way, shape, or form. Maybe not completely disabled, but at least a process that maybe needs to be worked on to get back or may never come back. But the understanding is so important.
Yeah, understanding how to allow those individuals time to respond. They're not going to just be able to answer like I'm answering your questions.
Right.
They need time to either think about it. They need time to figure out where are they going to find the words or the pictures that express their answer. And just allowing that time is so critical.
Mm-hmm. Let's take a quick break from our conversation with Stephanie Maki of CTEC to allow those who make the program possible to share their messages with us.
Make our communities bright with Smudge Shine Awards. Now through July 31st, your nonprofit can apply for a chance to receive funding for projects that improve and revitalize communities in our service area. We're seeking proposals that support zero carbon workforce development, environmental justice and equity, inclusive economic growth, and STEM education. Smudge Shine Awards are competitive and funds are limited. Submit your proposal by July 31st. Learn more at smud.org/shine.
I'm thrilled to have Western Health Advantage partnering with us as they do so much to support so many nonprofit agencies in our community. As a truly local health plan, you'll find individual and family options, employer options, plans for CalPERS and Medicare Advantage. From medical services to pharmacy, health and wellness support, as well as behavioral health care, Western Health Advantage has a plan that fits what you need. As an employer, for profit or nonprofit business, individual or family, you can find more at westernhealth.com.
Hello, this is Scott Thomas with Cap Trust in our Sacramento office. I specialize in working with local nonprofits and associations. Annually, we survey private and public nonprofit organizations across the country to better understand challenges they see in today's environment. In our more recent survey, we heard concerns about proper board governance, mission-aligned investment, and how to implement alternative investments. If you would like a copy of the survey or to discuss your organization, look me up, Scott Thomas at captrust.com.
How about funding? Let's talk a little bit about how the organization is funded, because you don't work with the insurance companies and you're in a different space because you don't literally manage the equipment per se. You're this intermediary. You're the go-between the patient and a variety of different resources.
Yes.
So how does one get the funding individually, and or how do you get paid?
So the referrals from Alta California Regional Center, Alta then pays for the services that we provide to their referred clients. And that funding comes through DDS and state funding. And there's a lot of back end on that I'm not privy to, but we do have an established rate with the regional center, and they pay us for the services that we provide.
Okay.
But those services need to be in direct support of the client. There's a lot of other things that go into that. We've got schedulers who handle all the scheduling for our staff because they need to coordinate what direction they're going to go. So if you're going to Elk Grove, you're kind of doing all of Elk Grove. We're not jumping around to Roseville or Placerville. So that we have administrative staff. We can't bill the time that they work. Then all the time that our staff is in the car traveling to these appointments, that is also time that can't be billed to the client, but it is time that is paid to the staff. And so helping to bridge that funding gap is a critical need of ours.
Well, and what an important part of the conversation, because that would come under the unrestricted funding part, because it's administrative, it's travel, but it's still part of the expense.
Yeah, and it also kind of falls under travel. And a lot of the grants and things that we research, they don't want to cover general operating expenses, and they don't want to cover travel. And so then that gets a little tricky. How do we find that funding? So it's been a struggle.
So there is a bit of funding beyond Alta Regional, which is that you do apply for grants. You have some opportunities to generate some revenue or income from different resources.
We have to be real careful right now about the grants that we do apply for, because so often there are specific deliverables that are expected. And since we are short-staffed, we don't have the capacity at the moment to take on additional responsibilities outside of the client service. So we try to look for grant opportunities that are a little bit less restrictive. We recently received a $1,000 grant from the South Sacramento Rotary Club, and so using that where we can to fill the funding gaps.
Sure, love those service organizations, right? Stephanie, with regard to some numbers, one of the things you mentioned a little bit earlier in the conversation was a wait list. What are we looking at? How long is the wait list?
Well, right now, previously we've never had a wait list, but back in October, we got to a point where the referrals were coming so quickly that we just couldn't keep up. So we did have to start a wait list, and right now it's about 6 months long. That represented right now 30 to 35 clients. Try to take a dozen or so every month or so as we wrap up other clients. And that's largely due to the fact that we are short-staffed.
And we'll talk about that in just a second.
Yeah.
So waitlist is one of those numbers. Budget. What is roughly the budget you work with annually?
Typically, our income budget is about $600,000 a year currently, and we ride the over and under line pretty closely.
I would imagine. I would imagine. And then what about numbers of employees? How many people do you have that work for the organization?
Well, I can't speak for the whole organization, but for our program.
For CTEC,
For our program. Myself as the program manager, and then we have 3 speech-language pathologists who primarily do the evaluations and case manage. Then we've got 4 what we call AAC trainers, and AAC stands for Augmentative and Alternative Communication. They provide training and support. Once individuals have received those devices, they're the ones that are going out and educating the families and training everyone. Most of them are part-time, but then we also have an office manager and an administrative assistant who do all of that background administrative stuff, but primarily they do all the scheduling so that we can be as efficient as possible in our travels.
Yeah, and keep everybody in the zone where they should be for that particular day, because you're right.
And then we do have one other little group of individuals that work for us. They are our AAC mentors. These are 4 young ladies that are device users. They are clients of ours, but they're also paid staff. And they meet regularly each month to plan and facilitate what we call Jazzy Talkers. And Jazzy Talkers is a social group for individuals who use devices. They meet on a Friday each month. We have an in-person group. We also have an online group. And these ladies plan those meetings, and then they lead them as well. And we're working on some additional things we might be able to get them involved in. Occasionally, they do sit in on a client session so that individual can see what's possible.
How neat, though, to have a mentor of sorts.
Yeah.
Somebody who gets it. You know, they've got the device. They understand what you're dealing with.
Yes.
And from the meetup, so to speak, your Jazzy talkers, as they get together, that's very cool. But the ability for others to see, I can integrate in some way, shape, or form. There is some normalcy to what I'm doing, and these people know what I'm dealing with.
Actually, I will share something that was remarkably different but very encouraging that happened back in May at our Jazzy Talkers. As I said, we do work in school districts. We were working in one of these special education classrooms, and classroom was full of like 6 to 8-year-olds. And their teacher wanted a field trip for them to come to our Jazzy Talkers meeting. And so we were at one of the local libraries, and the class came. There was about 13 students, plus teachers, aides, their school speech-language pathologist, and parents. And they came, they observed, they interacted, and it was successful. We were really nervous because primarily the Jazzy Talkers group is usually adults, and then to have these small kids, are they going to, and with special needs, are they going to be able to, really get anything out of it? But they were very curious about these devices, and it was a really good experience.
I think as the technology changes and we all become so integrated with devices, the abnormalcy, let's say, of seeing somebody with the screen and pecking away from a wheelchair isn't going to be so abnormal anymore.
Exactly. And that's what prompted this, because there were a couple of students in the class who were using iPads for communication. Other kids were curious, and the teacher recognized that and was able to capitalize on it.
What a wonderful teacher to pick up and recognize that this is an opportunity. There's an organization called A Touch of Understanding, and they do something similar. They take the tools of a variety of different disabilities into the classroom.
Actually, one of our mentors works with A Touch of Understanding. Yes.
They did an episode with us a while back, and I had the opportunity to experience a classroom, going through all the process. It was amazing, just amazing. It's great to hear.
Yeah.
Well, good. See, there's another, a collaboration effort that you wouldn't even think of. Let's imagine for a minute that money wasn't an object, and somebody says, "Yeah, Stephanie, give me a really good reason to write you a blank check."
Oh.
What would it look like?
Well, as I said, we've kind of ridden that over and under on our budget so tightly that we have to consider every dollar that's spent. But our first level would be to be able to fully fund the program and provide laptops, phones, and transportation for our staff under the company instead of using their own, because they are using their own laptops, their own phones, and their own cars for all of this travel and work that they're doing. So to be able to provide that to them would be our first level.
Well, and that might also attract more people, making it easier to recruit. And...
Yes, because that is an obstacle. If they have to use their own equipment, that isn't the most attractive hiring perspective. But then the next level of that is that we'd love to be able to have some satellite offices, because there's a huge part of Northern California that inquire for services that we just can't get to them because we go out. They're just too far for us to go to. If we could have develop some satellite offices, that would be really helpful. And I guess probably the ultimate dream goal way down the line, I guess, would be to have something like a coffee shop that perhaps working in that coffee shop are some of our higher functioning clients, but it also has spaces where groups like Jazzy Talkers can gather, or we could meet, instead of going out in the community to a Starbucks or something, meet clients in this coffee shop. So it still feels comfortable with some other, gathering rooms for other purposes. That is kind of like that ultimate dream goal.
I'm thinking of some organizations that might have the capacity to create that sort of an environment, who I won't mention here because they would sue me. I think that's a brilliant idea. It's a coffee shop for those with these speech disabilities to experience all levels of device and communications, to where they would really be able to not only communicate and associate, but build community amongst themselves.
Yes.
And then that transfers into whatever digitally they can push out, and then Jazzy Talkers and the whole thing just
we have lots of snippets of ideas that could really enhance that. And another portion of that level is to develop a literacy program, so that once they have their communication devices, it really helps to expand their capacity for communication and further enhances their lives. And again, using that kind of a situation would be part of that.
And now back to the reality of the situation, which is, we know already one of the challenges is if you have a backlog of people wanting the program, the demand is greater than the ability to service it. What is it that's causing that?
Our primary need, fundamentally, in order to be able to serve our clients efficiently and eliminate that wait list, is we need staff. We are looking for licensed speech language pathologists, or individuals with master's degree in special education or assistive technology, who have some of that background with the augmentative and alternative communication, and then that want to develop it more. Because even if they don't have all of that background and know about all the devices, we can train them. We have that, and we've got the depth of knowledge in our existing staff. But that's the thing, is we need people to be able to help us provide those services.
You had mentioned roughly about 30, 35 on the wait list. How many people are serviced at any given point in time actively?
Actively, our client list is Between 290 and 320 clients at any given time.
Wow.
And throughout the course of a year, we generally will see about 500.
Okay. I get it. Now I get it. I would not have imagined it would be that many people.
16 years ago when we started, the projected capacity for the program was 80 clients in a year.
Mm-hmm.
The demand has really outpaced the original program design. And so we just need to get all of the infrastructure in place to be able to continue to scale with the demand.
At least you have the processes in place. You have something familiar that's working.
Yes.
And you have the relationships with the people that you need to have the relationships with, whether it be collaborative or technologically. You just now need
we need additional relationships.
You need additional relationships that are paid and work with you. You know, you shared the story of the Jazzy Talkers.
Uh-huh.
Any other examples of maybe people who have started up through CTEC to where they become truly functional that you could exemplify for us?
I've got a few stories that I could share. The first one that happened when I started with the program 9.5 years ago, I was the office manager sitting at the front desk. And one of our clients came in, and after his session, he came out, and it happened to be my birthday. And he sang happy birthday to me using his communication device. And it was so sweet. One that will always stick with me. A couple of years later, I was on the phone trying to schedule an appointment for a little girl. She was 4 years old, had just received her device. And while I'm talking to her mom was so excited she couldn't help but share. When she had asked her daughter what she wanted for lunch that day, she was expecting that she was just going to make peanut butter and jelly, but asked her. Using her device, this 4-year-old told her, "I want tomato soup and grilled cheese." And Mom was so ecstatic that never would have guessed that's what she wanted, and never would have guessed that she could communicate that clearly, that quickly. But guess what she got for lunch that day? Tomato soup and grilled cheese.
You know, and as we're recording this, it's just a little bit after lunchtime. I'm getting hungry because I love tomato soup and grilled cheese.
So I mean, those are just a few, but we have individuals who are able to start micro businesses and communicate with their clients and their customers using their communication device, but they're able to sustain a business now that they have the means to communicate.
I would imagine there's opportunities, just they're immense in terms of the capabilities. Once somebody recognizes what they can do that nobody knew that they were capable of doing, to where they can fully function through the device as if they weren't disabled through their speech.
Yes, I've had situations where I'm speaking with someone who has a communication device. I know they can't speak back to me. I'll ask them a question, and their support staff says, "She can't talk." And I'm like, "Yes, she can." Let's give her a minute. And so it's just really a matter of educating the public that just because I can't speak doesn't mean I don't have anything to say. That is critical. That's the impetus of everything.
That's a great line.
It is not mine. It is one that is just often used within this community.
Mm-hmm. So you see a lot of challenging things throughout the course of every single day. What does Stephanie do to relax? What do you do when it's over?
I work very hard to schedule a couple of days off each month so that I can sew. I'm a quilter. I love to make quilts. Working with color and fabric really relaxes me and makes me happy and feeds my creativity, and then I can come back to work with my creative brain activated again. Sometimes you just get stuck in what has to be done and you can't think outside that box. So yeah, quilting is my therapy.
Good. Well, and I can understand that. My wife loves to color, and the stuff she colors though is extremely comprehensive. It's not like a coloring book. It's a very detailed.
One of my daughters is like that too.
Right.
That's her creativity,
and she gets to just blank out. It's almost meditative.
Exactly.
And I understand it. I tried for about a minute.
Yeah. Another thing that I do is with my husband is we both like to play disc golf. So we'll go out. That gives us a little bit of exercise and fresh air. So that those are the two things I do when I'm not working.
And that's one I don't understand. I see people playing it all the time, and I'm amazed that anybody can even get that disc into the basket wherever the basket is.
It's so much fun. Even if you don't make it into the basket, it's still fun.
And you're right. It's outside. You're usually in a wooded area.
I call it a hike with a purpose.
There you go. Exactly. How does somebody that's interested in the services that you provide get in touch with CTEC?
For the most part, I primarily recommend contacting your regional center service coordinator and asking about a referral for a CTEC evaluation. Understanding that there is still that wait list, but we can at least get you on the list. Mm-hmm. If your individual is school-aged, then contact your school district about getting a communication assessment. If there's no staff within that district who can provide the appropriate assessment, you can ask about having them contract with CTEC, and we can come in and do that assessment. But the district has to contract with us for us to be able to do that with school-aged kids. And then if you're not sure, then you can always reach out to us through our website, which is ctecaac.org, ctecaac.org, and email us through that. Get back to you with the proper next steps.
And that's also where we can find the video for communication and communication disabilities. It's on that website?
Our STAR video training series is at the bottom of our website, and it's a whole training series. There's about 15 videos, and you can actually get certification with that too as well.
Oh, wow.
We also have a calendar of events. We provide online training each month for some of the more common communication applications. And it also has our Jazzy Talkers schedule on.
I was going to ask, are they on there so people know when they're meeting?
Yeah. Now, there's also a few success stories. Some of our clients, we have some video footage of some successful clients that might be interesting as well.
And we will have that website address in the show notes, so you don't have to remember all those letters.
Yes.
Because I would dyslexia them. They'd be all screwed up if I even tried to repeat them.
Like I said, it's even hard to just say them individually.
Well, Stephanie, you're not the highest profile, highest visibility organization. And I think part of that is because the people are not the highest visibility because they stay at home.
Yes.
They're not out in the community as much as they could be and hopefully will be as we build this coffee houses for them to meet and gather. But what you do needs to be amplified so others are aware that you do exist and you have the capability through technology to help these families, help these students, help these adults who have been dealing with challenges all their life. And it's amazing to know, A, that you exist, but even more so that enough people know about it that there's a waiting list.
Yes.
And the waiting list is growing. That's the good and the bad of it all. But it's a need, obviously, that the community has that has to be shared and people have to be aware, because if you get to the waiting list, the odds are good you're going to get serviced at some point in time.
Yes, exactly. But it's really important to make sure that those families know that there's hope, that there is something out there that can assess what can help. And so, yeah, we just really want to make sure that the disabilities community knows, and even beyond that, that the general community knows, because the more the general community knows, the more they can accept and accommodate and work with those who have the disability.
Mm-hmm. From the smallest, 4 years old, you mentioned?
We work with them as little as 18 months old.
Oh, my goodness.
You'd be amazed at what they can do with an iPad.
And you start them early. They're really going to go through the program well. All the way up to 18 in the identified disability, but for those who have come into the program for the rest of their adult lives.
Yes. Primarily, about 85% of those that we work with are over the 22 years and older. You know, they've had these disabilities for years, and sometimes be working with someone who's 45 and it's the first time they're actually getting some method of communication that is effective. And so at that point, so many people think they can't do it, and they really can.
Mm-hmm. Well, and your key word there, hope.
Yes.
The ability is there. We just have to know. We have to know that it exists.
Yeah. Identify the right solution that will open that door for them.
So through the classrooms, into businesses, into integration in some way, shape, or form for those with disabilities in a communicative space.
Yes.
Because it's everything. Thank you so much for what you do. And I'm so glad we had the opportunity to connect to get this story told.
Yes, thank you so much for having us on. We appreciate getting that word out and just being able to tell our story, because there's so many stories within our program, and they all deserve to be heard.
Well, thank you. However that story gets told,
Exactly.
Right? Thank you for listening to the Nonprofit Podcast Network. I hope you enjoyed the episode. If what you heard moved you, please reach out to that organization and do what you can to help. If you like and appreciate what we're doing to support local nonprofits, please give us a positive review, subscribe, and share. If you're a nonprofit with an interest in participating in an episode, you can reach me at jeff@hearmenowstudio.com. Once again, we're grateful for the businesses who have made this program possible. CapTrust, fiduciary advice for endowments and foundations. You can find them in Sacramento, Roseville, and Folsom. CapTrust.com. SMUD Shine Awards, helping support our nonprofit community with grants for more efficient energy usage. smud.org/shine. And Western Health Advantage, a full-service healthcare plan for individuals, employer groups, and families. westernhealth.com.